check 1 2. Check test 1 2.
Test 1 2. Check 1 2 3.
So I'd like to call this meeting to order. Okay, now is the time that I'll call to order this local government summit, and I'll have our Henderson City Clerk, Monica Simmons, give us posting and confirmation, and then she will also take care of going around and making sure that all of the cities and counties are properly posted and confirmed also.
Thank you, Mayor Hafen. On behalf of the city and county clerks, confirmation of posting has been provided for the record for the following entities: City of Henderson, City of Boulder City, City of Elko, City of Fallon, City of Mesquite, City of Las Vegas, City of North Las Vegas, City of Reno, City of Sparks, Clark County, Eureka County, Washoe County, Pershing County, Humboldt County. Now for roll call and introductions by city. City of Henderson.
I'm Mayor Andy Hafen. With me is Councilwoman Jerry Schroeder, Councilwoman Deborah March, and Councilman Steve Kirk, and we do have a quorum.
City of Boulder City.
Mayor Tobler. I have with me Councilman Travis Chandler. We are waiting on one other councilman, and we also have our city manager, Vicki Newton.
City of Caliente. City of Carlin. City of Elko. City of Ely. City of Fallon.
I'm Councilman Bob Erickson, and I have with me Councilwoman Rachel Dahl.
Thank you. City of Burnley. City of Las Vegas.
Good afternoon. Oscar Goodman, Mayor of the City of Las Vegas, and with me today are my Mayor Pro Tem, Gary Reese, Councilman Wilson, Councilman Ross, Councilwoman Tarkanian, and Councilman Anthony.
City of Lovelock. City of Mesquite.
Good afternoon. I'm Mayor Susan Holochek. With me is Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman Dave Bennett. We also have Councilman Carl Gustavson, Councilman Randy Entz, Councilwoman Donna Fairchild, and Councilman Gina Withelder.
City of North Las Vegas.
Good afternoon. I'm Sherry Buck, Mayor. With me, Councilwoman Anita Wood, Councilman Richard Churchio.
City of Reno.
Mayor Bob Cushell, Mayor of Reno.
City of Sparks.
Bob Cushell, Mayor of Reno. Have the Vice Mayor Dwight Dorch, Councilman Iazzi, Councilman Hatchett, Councilman Spraza, and Councilman Zadrin. We have a quorum.
Thank you. City of Sparks.
Mayor Gino Martini, City of Sparks. I have with me today Councilman Ron Schmidt, our Mayor Pro Tem, Councilwoman Julia Ratty, and our City Manager Sean Carey.
City of Wells. City of West Wendover. City of Winnemucca. City of Yerington.
Good afternoon. I'm Mayor Doug Homestead, and I have with me City Manager Danny Newell.
Pahrump.
Vice Chairman Bill Dolan. We're waiting on Chairman Nicole Shue, and I have with me Bill Cobarter, Town Manager.
Gardnerville. Incline Village, GID.
I'm here.
My name is Gene Brockman. I'm trustees for the village.
Thank you. Counties, Carson.
Good afternoon, I'm Robin Williamson, Supervisor of Carson City.
Churchill. Clark County.
Good afternoon, I'm Roy Reed, Chairman of the Clark County Commission. With me are Commissioner Sisolak, Brown, and Wheatley, and Commissioner Giuliano and Ralph. We have a quorum.
Douglas County.
Thank you. Doug Johnson, Commissioner from Douglas County.
Elko.
Good afternoon. Ward Russell, Commissioner from Elko County, and I have with me our County Manager, Rob Stokes.
Esmeralda.
Commissioner Nancy Boland, I'm here alone, there's no quorum.
Eureka.
Mike Page, Commissioner.
Humboldt. Lander.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Ray Williams attending with our Executive Director, Gene Esparilla.
Lincoln.
Good afternoon. I'm Tommy Rao, County Commissioner from Lincoln County, and just coming into the building is Mayor Keith Larson.
Lyon. Mineral. Nye. Pershing.
Commissioner Roger Maxibo, Pershing County.
Story. Washoe.
Good afternoon, I'm Bonnie Weber, Vice Chairman of Washoe County Commission, and with me is Commissioner Kitty Jones, and also our County Manager, Katie Simon.
White Pine. And I don't believe we've missed anyone. If so, if you would let us know for the record. Mayor Hafen, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you very much. If we could all please rise and we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Mayor Hafen, Caliente is here for the record.
All right. Well, good afternoon and welcome to this Nevada Local Government Summit. On behalf of my colleagues of the City Council, we welcome you to the City of Henderson. We're proud to host this historic and important discussion. And this is an historic occasion because I don't know that in Nevada we've ever had a meeting with so many city and county leaders in the same room. And it's important because we're here to discuss legislation that may have serious effects on the operations of local government and the people we serve on a daily basis. In particular, we're going to be talking about legislation that affects us all, north, south, urban, rural. It's important for us to talk about what this legislation means and how we need to prepare to respond to it. I've already introduced our City Council, and I'd like these folks to know that I appreciate their different viewpoints, their guidance, and their leadership. They're good friends and great representatives of the people of the City of Henderson, and I really appreciate what you all do. We have city and county officials from every part of Nevada here today. We appreciate your efforts to be here and recognize you as Nevada's local government leaders. We do have some state officials in the audience with us as well, and I want to thank them for joining us today. On behalf of all cities and counties here, please accept our warmest thanks for your attending. We hope your time with us will be beneficial as we talk about the impacts your legislation will have on the services we provide to our residents. Hopefully, we can all work together in partnership to solve some of the problems facing our state. We hope the discussion will be valuable and help you gain insight about how local government works, and we look forward to working with you in the future on these and other legislative issues. By way of introduction to our discussion today, we all know that our fiscal health, both state and local, have been in decline since the global financial collapse just a little over a year ago. We have all watched as the federal government has responded with bailouts and stimulus packages, and we've seen our state leaders having to deal with the largest budget hole in our state's history. The legislature deserves a lot of credit for dealing with that crisis and for working together to find a solution on time and without going into a special session. They deserve a lot of praise for showing courage and fortitude. With that said, I can't underscore enough what difficulties local officials have faced. I'm sure each one of you can share a story of hardship and sacrifice. Local government budgets have been decimated. I personally know this, that for the first time in 22 years here in the city of Henderson, we've actually had to make cuts to services and personnel. Henderson is a city that's been ranked as one of the best places to live in America. We've earned that distinction because of our commitment to safety, our commitment to parks and open space, and good planning. Yet at a time when those services and quality of life issues are more important to our residents than ever, we're having to look at deeper and deeper cuts. And quite frankly, there's really no room left to cut. This is where people come to live and work and raise their families. As local governments, we provide the daily services taxpayers need, and our ability to support them, their families, and their businesses is in jeopardy. If we walk away with anything from this meeting, I'd like it to be a better understanding of what it is that local governments provide to our citizens. We locals need to come away with a single voice when it comes to the importance of city services, including quality of life elements that our local businesses, our residents, and families want, need, and deserve. It's important that we not lose sight of the fact that these are people who work hard all week and need things provided to them sometimes. They need a place to play with their kids, walk their dog, shop, or watch a ball game, and they need to feel safe and protected. These are the people who pay taxes. They provide the fuel for the economic engines that drive our economy. These are the people we serve directly on a daily basis. I think we all want our state leaders and representatives to understand that if they make decisions to take away money from cities and counties, they are actually doing harm to their own constituents. And the notion of giving locals the ability to utilize revenues as we grow or even allow us to raise our own taxes only to take it away when the state is in a bind is tantamount to the old cliche of robbing Peter to pay Paul. We need a clearer understanding of what the state needs to provide versus what cities and counties need to provide. We need a clearer understanding of how these services will be all funded, while keeping in mind that equity is a very important part of that discussion. Today we will have presentation and discussion on SB 264, SCR 37, and AB 494. SB 264 is an interim study concerning the powers delegated to local governments. SCR 37 will be a review of Nevada's revenue structure, and AB 494 requires a report on the consolidation or reorganization of certain local government functions. These three pieces of legislation all overlap to a certain extent and will all be given more specifics as we go through the agenda. We have the good fortune of having Mike Alistoy and Marvin Levitt with us here today. These are two of the best and brightest technical advisors on fiscal matters in our state. You'll hear more about these two men from our summit facilitator today. And speaking of our facilitator, we all know him and the long and distinguished service he has provided in Clark County. He most recently served as the Clark County manager for 5 years before moving on to the corporate offices of Harrah's. We appreciate Mr. Tom Riley for his willingness to facilitate this discussion. But before I turn it over to him, I would like to thank Terry Barber and Monica Simmons from our staff for their tireless work in putting this summit together. I'd also like to acknowledge the staff in every city and every county across the state that helped to properly get this meeting noticed. We appreciate all their help here today. As I said in the beginning, I believe this will be a great meeting, and I truly hope each and every one of you feels welcome and at home participating here today. Thank you for coming, and I'll turn the time over to Mr. Tom Riley.
Mayor, thank you. And
Excuse me, Mr. Rowley.
Excuse me.
We have a meeting for our respective councils at this time. And on behalf of the City Council of Las Vegas, the October 14, 2009 special meeting of the City Council in conjunction with the Nevada Local Government Summit is called to order. This meeting has been properly noticed and posted in compliance with the Nevada Open Meeting Law.
for a point of clarification, does that need to be done in each jurisdiction?
I believe so.
The individual jurisdiction posted this as a special meeting, they would need to do that. If they posted it just as a summit, I'm not sure they would need to, I'll refer to our city clerk.
And so for clarification, if there's a quorum, you would need to open the meeting, is that correct?
Yes.
On behalf of Clark County, what he said.
On behalf of the City of North Las Vegas, we recognize this is an open meeting, verified that we are in compliance with the open meeting law, properly posted, and we do have a quorum.
On behalf of the City of Mesquite, we do have a quorum. We are subject to the open meeting law, and it has been properly noticed.
City of Reno, we have a quorum, and this is properly noticed.
City of Boulder City, we do have a quorum now, and we did have it properly noticed.
Any other jurisdictions have quorums? Okay, then we'll go ahead and begin. We're under tight time constraints. So first of all, it's a very impressive gathering. Congratulations to you and your staff for actually putting this together. Just a reminder, this is informational, so we hope that you take back the information gleaned from this gathering and give the type of direction, discourse, and dialogue in your own jurisdictions. Because this is a posted meeting and because we're trying to record it, I will ask that when you speak that you state your name and the jurisdiction you're from for recording purposes. This summit is of utmost importance to local governments. I know that from a personal standpoint, and I know that is extremely important to everybody in this room. I do want to remind everybody that we are engaged in public discourse, so I will ask that you keep any comments you make civil, and I think that's understood. I'd also like to remind everybody we're under very tight time constraints. We basically have 3 presentations on 3 pieces of legislation, a 10-minute presentation followed by a 20-minute discussion. So I'm going to ask that each of you be as concise as possible. If you're from the same jurisdiction, please don't repeat what someone else from your jurisdiction said. And I will apologize in advance for cutting folks off if we get too lengthy and verbose in your comments. And please accept my apologies, but in order to keep that going, I think it's necessary that we establish that. The format will be as follows. We will address the 3 pieces of legislation, the first one being on home rule. There will be a 10-minute presentation, and then I ask that we have 2 flip charts here. And the 2 flip charts is that, one, we'd like to basically, hopefully get a good understanding of what the legislation means. But most importantly to capture here is that what are you doing in your own jurisdiction? So it's good information. Others may not know. We want to capture that, and we're going to capture that on that flip chart. The other flip chart will be comments that you have about how to move forward, collectively, individually, in order to address the issues with the state. So I ask if those 2 issues be your comments. We will collect this information. Hopefully at the end we'll have time to wrap up and then talk about potential or some next steps. So with that, and I hope you don't mind too, I'm going to actually have this timed. So we'll have a 10-minute presentation. If you go over, I'm going to cut you off, and then we're going to stick very to each of the 3 areas. The first one is on SB 264, dealing with home rule.
Good afternoon. the record, my name is Bristol Ellington, City of Henderson Assistant City Manager, and I, along with Chris Good with the City of Reno, will give you a brief summary on Senate Bill 264, Home Rule Interim Study. There appears to be no universal definition as to what constitutes a true home rule, as every state is different in how they allow home rule and what state legislatures grant to cities and counties. According to one definition, home rule is the power of local self-government, or the power of local government to deal with matters of local concern without having to turn to the state legislature for approval, as long as their actions do not contravene already defined state policies. Nevada is one of 4 states in the nation that does not have specific provisions within its constitution, amendments, or laws granting home rule to municipalities. The other states are Alabama, New Hampshire, North Carolina, and Hawaii. Counties, however, are not the same as cities in Nevada. Counties function like general law cities, such as Fallon and Mesquite, more so than charter cities. More specifically, the powers of counties are strictly outlined in the general law provisions of NRS, whereas the provisions that govern charter cities are more tailored to the individual community. Without provisions relating to home rule, Nevada is considered a non-home rule state. Without home rule, the general application, I can't see that far. The general applications of Dillon's rule is used to limit powers of cities, counties, and towns. The rule states that a municipal corporation possesses and can exercise the following powers and no others. First, those granted in express words. Second, those necessarily implied or necessarily incident to the powers expressly granted. And third, those absolutely essential to the declared objects and purposes of the corporation, not simply convenience, but indispensable. In Nevada, the lack of home rule generates a significant amount of legislation each session as clarification and expansion of powers sought by cities and counties. During the 75th regular session of the Nevada legislature, Senator Terry Kerr sponsored Senate Bill 264. This bill calls for a study to be conducted to examine the feasibility of increasing powers of local government related to taxation, the potential fiscal impact to the state for abolishing Dillon's rule, and the experiences of states that haven't rejected Dillon's rule. The study is due to the interim committee on or before June 1st of 2010, and a report of the results of the study is due no later than February 1st, 2011, to the Director of the Legislative Counsel Bureau, or LCB, for transmission to the 76th session of the Nevada Legislature.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Good, Assistant to the City Manager, City of Reno. Let's take a look at what SB 264 sets up. It provides to establish a full interim committee consisting of 6 members. They are listed on your screen. They include the chairman of the State Government Affairs Committee, the Senate Government Affairs Committee, the chairman of the Assembly Government Affairs Committee, 1 member appointed by the Senate Majority Leader, 1 by the Senate Minority Leader, 1 by the Speaker of the Assembly, and 1 by the Assembly Minority Leader. It also establishes that this committee may create a technical advisory committee consisting only of local government representatives. Since we put this presentation together, we have learned that the committee does not plan to do that. Rather, they plan to stick only to what the law requires, and that is to set up this type of interim TAC, Technical Advisory Committee, 9 members, 6 representatives of local government, and 3 representatives of state agencies. They must meet at least once every 3 months, and they are to put together a report due to the full interim committee by June 1, 2010. This group is established to foster effective communication, cooperation, and partnerships between state and local governments, and to improve the governmental services delivered to the people of this state. They are to look at the structure of local governments in Nevada as well as the state, the functions of each, the relationships between them, the allocation of resources between state and local governments, and any recommended legislation is to come back to that full committee by June 1, 2010. Finally, the key dates and next steps here. Again, the law provides that the full interim committee may establish a committee made only of local government representatives. They decided not to do that. Rather, they're sticking only to establishing that technical advisory committee for intergovernmental relations that I just described. That group is to have the report due by June 1, 2010 to the full interim committee, and then the full interim committee is to have a report to the LCB, the Legislative Council Bureau, by February 1, 2011. That's 15 months from now. Taking a step back, the purpose here is to look at and research the options for local government control. Now, options include an advisory ballot question encouraging legislators to grant home rule through statutory changes. That would be done by the state legislature. Of course, the state legislature could make statutory action with or without such an advisory question. Also, there's the potential to amend the Nevada Constitution. As we know, there are two ways to do that. You can start with the initiative petition process, or you can begin at the legislature, but either way, it's at least a 5-year process. That concludes our presentation on SB 264. Did we do it in the time frame?
Yes, thank you. So we'll try to get future, dim the lights for future presentations. Okay, so the two areas, and you don't have to respond to both of them, but one is for informational purposes so others can understand what you may or may not be doing in your jurisdiction, if you could share that, and or to address some ideas, some options about moving forward collectively or individually or regionally. So with that, who would like to start out? Commissioner.
June Kiliani, Clark County. Could we just make a note to maybe research, or maybe it's been looked at? Could local governments that are counties be established in statutes similar to charters are, as the charter cities are, rather than going through a total amendatory statutory hit or miss each time? And I don't know if anybody's looked at that part.
Mike, do you know if that's occurring or not?
The last study was done, I believe, in 1990, and I don't know that it ever looked at charters. Creating, counties are creatures of the legislature, separate from those of cities that were created by charter. And I wonder if that just finds another difference.
We'll make a note of that. Mr. Alstor, Mr. Levitt, do you know that? No. We'll make a note to... Okay. Has there been a response in any jurisdiction to doing anything to advance this, or? I believe Reno has passed some type of resolution, is that correct? Yeah, and just state your name, too. And
from the city of Reno. One of the things, if we could get the information from NACO, because I believe back in the 90s, this was an advisory question on some type of home rule or the establishment of unfunded mandates. I think that would be interesting information to have, the historical data. But also, if we could work with our legislators on how to maybe push certain elements of home rule, because even if we were to go out to a ballot question, it'd simply be advisory, and we've already done this before, I believe back in the 90s. But if we could get that information, I think that'd be helpful.
to be more specific, okay? Constance, you got that? Thanks. Yes, we'll hear from Sparks, and then we'll...
Ron Schmidt, City of Sparks. I think that it's obvious that we're not a ball of fire here with a lot of stuff going on, but I think the first thing is, Reno set an example. I think we have to do it is each jurisdiction, both counties and cities, needs to do a resolution on this, and we need to be speaking as one voice across the state of Nevada. We need to make sure we have 100% participation from all the counties and all the cities that this is the direction we want to go, because if we come at this divided or not fully together, we're going to be picked apart on it. So I think that Reno's done it already. I think we need to all do that. Thank you.
Suggestion to model the resolution done by the City of Reno. Okay.
My question is, if the state was to go to home rule, how would that affect the different jurisdictions?
Mr. Levitt or Mike Alstory, did you hear that question?
No.
If you can speak right now.
If the state goes to home rule, how would that affect the jurisdiction?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There's a problem because, let's just say, for instance, they said in very general language, home rule is hereby granted to the, now what does that mean? You know, and I think we think sometimes that we could just simply adopt a home rule law, but when you think about it, what exactly does that mean? In other words, let's suppose we granted this home rule on sales tax, or on revenue, but just take sales tax as an example. And so that each individual local government could increase the sales tax or decrease the sales tax. Now what does that mean now that we collect sales tax at the city level? Do we collect sales tax at the county level? Could we have multiple rates within a county? Could we have each city levying their own sales tax so that we have a different rate for every single city within a county? In other words, what I'm saying is that it can tend to get fairly complicated when you start to grant this. And so it's not, I don't think it's as simple as matter as just saying we grant home rule, because you now have local governments in competition, so to speak, with each other. And how do you work this out? And so I think it's much, if we want it, it's something that's much more complicated than just saying we want it. I think we have to actually work out details as to what areas do we have it. For instance, right now, we have the state levies essentially sales tax that comes to the local governments. In the city-county relief tax, both the basic and the supplemental, if we got complete home rule, would that go away? You know, that's levied by the state. If we want to levy our own, does that go away and we now have to reimpose it? And do we now receive the money that's only collected within our jurisdiction? Or is it allocated on the state and the county level the way it is now? In other words, there's a lot of questions.
So you're also suggesting, Marvin, that it perhaps has to be addressed, is it home rule for financial issues, structural issues, functional issues, et cetera, that there's many components, and it could have a ripple effect of other type of legislation. Mayor?
Oscar Goodman on behalf of Las Vegas. So do I understand then that there could be a wholesale granting of home rule, there could be partial granting of home rule, or those the alternatives? Should home rule be considered?
This is Mike Alstory for the record. To get to Tom's point about difference between fiscal and structural home rule, and what Mayor Goodman underscored this, I think, very well. You have to be somewhat surgical as far as which components of home rule would be granted and to which kind of jurisdiction. Take, for example, even within a county, the allocation of responsibilities for public services to counties and cities varies somewhat, with counties being responsible by law for certain social services, care for the indigent, the district judiciary, et cetera, if total home rule were granted, carte blanche to all governments, the kind of competition that Marvin spoke of on the fiscal side would also evidence itself on the structural side. So, in answer to your question, Mayor Goodman, it would have to be specific, whether and in very carefully thought out parts.
Thank you.
Tom?
Yes.
Steve Ross, City of Las Vegas. Tom, I'm less concerned, and since I have all of your attention, we're at that point now with some of our governments where it's not so much a fiscal issue, as Mr. Levitt talked about. It's not so much a tax issue for me as a city councilman in the City of Las Vegas. It is the other issues that we have to go to the legislature for, the structural issues, the functional components of our cities and our counties, as well as the personnel component. I mean, there's other things than just taxes, and I'd like everybody to be mindful of that. We're talking about other functions that our governments are trying to do, but every time we do it, we have to go to the legislature to get their permission. So this is significant. I mean, you can take taxes right off the table as far as I'm concerned. As we do that, though, be mindful. The state still needs to function. And that's something that has to be part of this and an element of this discussion as well.
So, Councilman Ross, you're saying that perhaps there has to be a deeper analysis of each of those different components and what the impact may be, so the jurisdictions can have a better understanding of, what level of support and to get more of a discourse individually.
Sure. And taxes are certainly an issue, but I don't think it's the major issue here. I think it's other issues that we're dealing with in our cities and our counties that we have challenges with. We need to do something. We can't until the session reconvenes to get something done for our charters. I think that's
Thank you. Other thoughts? Let's go here, and then we'll go back. Excuse me. Councilman?
Well, clearly, home rule works in other states, and just listening to Mike's commentary, I'm just curious as to, I'm sure there's many different forms that are incorporated in other states, and how we might incorporate it into the state of Nevada to make it work here. And I think we may be looking at what other states have done, and I suspect there are other states that have transitioned into home rule at various levels, and it might be worth us looking at best practices.
So, yeah, best practices of those that have it, and perhaps those that don't, and how they function, both of those areas. Other ideas or options to move forward? Yes.
Dave Azzi, City of Reno. One of my concerns has been maybe not so much home rule, but what they're doing to take away what we have right now. For instance, bills to lobby, to limit the number of bills that local governments have. Bills that would limit our ability to lobby our own legislature. Some of those things, it seems like they're eroding what we have, which is part of the problem. I think that's why they're seeing this approach, and we want to go all the way to home rule. There is something in the middle before we get home rule, and that's have better communication with our legislators. I just don't see them coming to us and telling us how their bills affect local governments. I mean, we were told by our delegation at the start of the last session they would not come after local governments. The last week, bang, we got hit. And none of that conversation happened. So part of that is just the erosion of what our rights are right now.
So it's supposed to be just looking at the larger issue of home rule, but also the inability, number one, with communication, or just looking at other aspects that limit the ability of local governments to be heard at the state level. Other options or ideas of moving forward? Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Lawrence Weekly, Clark County. I think for Clark County, I think one of the obstacles we've run into, and they're very simple things, and one of the things that our manager, Virginia Valentine, reminded me of is we actually have to go back to the legislature just to have permission to tow vehicles. When we deal in urban neighborhoods and more mature neighborhoods or areas of town, we have major code enforcement issues. We're very limited in how we can even address code enforcement issues, and so those are things that kind of handcuffed us when we look at, not only that, but how the city of Las Vegas was able to step up and even address the endoscopy issue that we were dealing with here. We weren't able to step out and deal with civil penalties on that level because we didn't have that home rule type flexibility. So we have little simple things that kind of handcuffed us here in Clark County that makes a big difference when it comes to providing services to our constituents.
As pointed out in the presentation, the differences between cities and counties, unless it's delineated in the legislation, the counties can't do it for very simple issues of public response, code enforcement, et cetera. So the analysis would include those type of details and differences that exist currently. Other options or thoughts of moving forward as a region or collectively as a state to be heard at the legislature? Commissioner.
Just a final question before you wrap up. Do we know who the 9 people are going to be that will be appointed? And is there objection within the room to even looking at structural, functional, fiscal, personnel, home rule? If there is, we need to know that as well from any of the local jurisdictions.
I think the first question is that the 9 legislators have been appointed, but if I understood your presentation correctly, they chose not to appoint any representation from local governments. Did I get that right?
They didn't do the may,
they did the must.
shall.
They did the shall, and have they made those appointments?
That's right. They did not do the may. There is a shall, and we don't know those names yet.
Okay.
And the shall includes 6 representatives of local government and 3 from state agencies.
So going back to the Commissioner's point, is there any objection of actually breaking out instead of the blanket home rule to actually dissect those areas of functional, of structural, of financial. So there could be a deeper analysis in each of your own jurisdictions. It makes sense. It has to. Is there any objections there?
That helps whoever might be picked.
Any other thoughts before we move on?
Hey, Tom, I've got one more. And this is a question for everybody. Again, Steve Ross, City of Las Vegas. A lot of silence in the room. And I think I want to ask this question. How many of you, and by a show of hands, how many of you are for some sort, some kind, some form of home rule? Raise your hands. Let's be honest here. What's this meeting about? That's pretty significant. Thank you, Tom.
Yes.
County Commission, I see one of the most onerous aspects of unfunded mandates is where the state says you're going to provide a particular service and then does not fund it, and also maintains all of the authority for how it's going to be served upon the population without us having flexibility to serve our population in that particular area. It seems like uniformity versus freedom, and home rule is freedom if we're going to be given that responsibility by the state. If we're not going to be given the money to accomplish it, then the freedom is to get through home rule, we can achieve the flexibility to give the best possible service to our constituents and to our communities. Without home rule, we're given something that is well, my word, onerous to me anyway. Thank you.
We have a couple more minutes. Is there a suggested format on how it would be delivered to the legislature? Is there any thoughts or ideas or options about, because what we have here is that we had a recommendation to actually pass a resolution is similar to the City of Reno, to actually break out the components of home rule for functional, structural, financial, to get a deeper analysis and have that discussion for your own jurisdictions. But what about actually how to make the presentation, either collectively, regionally, or individually to the legislature?
Chris Braga from the City of Reno, and we did, I mean, really the resolution was more of for discussion purposes, but I think the vehicle to do that is at NACO and at Nevada League of Cities. This week, starting tonight, is the Nevada League of Cities Conference. All the mayors are having a panel for the Big Five in discussing home rule and consolidation efforts. But I think this has got to be debated at both of those organizations where everyone's represented, and we can come up with, I think Councilman Ross brings up a good suggestion, breaking it down, and Chris G. from the county is structural and the fiscal responsibilities. But I think we can come up with something within those jurisdictions, working with our legislators to present that in the interim before the next session.
So one suggestion is to use the vehicles of NACO and the League of Cities as one way to advance not only the discussion that you'll have individually, but also collectively to see if there's more consensus moving forward.
Ray Williams from Lander County. One of the most foremost aspects of the home rule is that the closer the government is to the people, the more effective government can be. And one of the problems we've got in the state of Nevada is that one size fits all. When they go to the legislature, they come out with a policy, and it doesn't make any difference how big, how small, or anything else. You're going to have to comply with that policy.
Excellent point. The issue of even in the analysis of the breakdown of home rule, it is not a one-size-fits-all because it's so vastly different between the cities, the rural, the urban, to different parts of the state. So perhaps that type of analysis needs to look at, and that analysis you need in your own jurisdictions to have your own discussions of how much of the home rule would make sense or not in your own area. Commissioner?
I think we better not lose sight that there's an interim committee that's going to be making the final recommendation. So if you work through NACO and through the League of Cities and the technical committee, and then through that, if we could find buy-in, recognizing the needs of rurals versus, urbans, and then urban rurals, which may have their own needs, deal with that component and to get them to make the recommendation legislatively, that helps immensely rather than having for us to try to sponsor something. So I think we've got the opportunity. It's just whether or not we can get everybody together and bite off. Be careful what we ask for, and let's make sure what we ask for is something we can deliver. Because part of it is, I spent 16 years in the legislature. I didn't trust all of us, even though I supported home rule. And you've got to factor that there are people from all of our jurisdictions wanting to know why and how does this fit their constituents, which are our constituents. So we've never had that linkage, and I think that's part of what can come about through NACO.
So it sounds like there's general consensus on home rule. It sounds, too, that a deeper analysis is needed, that the state is small enough. There are vehicles through NACO and the League of Cities, the counties and cities managers all meet to actually have this type of dialogue, to further the discussion, and actually to see how perhaps a united voice or those that maybe have a regional component with those 4 different components of home rule could be presented. Any final comments on that before we move on?
Tom. Steve Wolfson, City of Las Vegas. I don't know that I would go so far as to say that there's a general consensus amongst the people here that we want home rule. I think when you look at the various categories, the fiscal, the structural, et cetera, I think there's a general consensus to further study the individual components to determine whether or not the individual entities want home rule and to what effect. And then the second thing, just a quick comment, and it kind of is a segue from Commissioner June Kiliani, and that is be careful what you ask for because you may get it. And what I mean by that is if we were to seek home rule and the legislature were to grant it, might the legislature then on their own create other ways to further obstruct, prohibit, et cetera, our abilities in other ways? So I think we just have to be careful of a response by the legislature. We'll give you home rule, but then we're also going to do something else.
Excellent point, the clarification. Any other thoughts or comments before we move on? Thank you. Oh, there's one more?
I do.
Yeah. There's 2 more, and then we'll move on.
Part of what I hope comes out of this today is it's no longer a we versus them. And if we continue in that road or make those kinds of thoughts, you're going to just continue to not be successful. So an elected official is an elected official is an elected official. We have to find the common ground, and that's not always happened. And so as local government now, we have an obligation to work with our elected officials that do go to the state because they have the same problems. They just may not have the same acknowledgement of what we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So hopefully part of that will come out of this summit as well.
And they have the same constituents. Right there, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you. I am Bonnie Weber, Washoe County, but also the president of Nevada NACO. And we've had many discussions at our board level, and we are very willing and have been willing to work with our legislature. And I think that's really important, that we are able to sit down and be respectful of them, as well as working together to get home rule. But we're not going to get it just all, here's home rule. We have to take baby steps. We have to work with them and find out what does work and what will work for us.
Perhaps forms for that communication to occur between local and state officials. Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. And let's move right into the second piece of legislation, which is SER 37, which is to review Nevada's revenue structure, and the report be made by the City of Sparks and Clark County.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Saber Smith-Newby. I'm the Director of Administrative Services for Clark County. And the presentation we have for you today regards SCR 37, which was passed by the 2009 legislature. It directed the Interim Finance Committee to establish a subcommittee that would review Nevada's revenue structure and provide long-term recommendations for revenue stabilization. Accordingly, at the August 3rd, 2009 meeting of the Interim Finance Committee, a subcommittee of 16 members was named to oversee the duties of the consultants. That subcommittee includes, on the Senate side, Senator Horsford, Matthews, Parks, Raggio, Rhodes, Schneider, Townsend, and Wiener. On the Assembly side, that includes Assembly persons Conklin, Anderson, Gokashia, Kirkpatrick, McLean, Oseguera, Settlemeyer, and Stewart. Senator Horsford is the chair, and Assemblyman Conklin is the vice chair. That subcommittee committee that was named has the charge for several tasks with respect to this study. The first is to review proposals for broad-based taxes which are fair and equitable, to examine strategies for mitigating tax burdens on both businesses and consumers, including reductions, if possible, in existing taxes, both state and local, to consider the public's willingness to have existing taxes be decreased as other tax revenues become available, to use current statistical information, proposing strategies and recommendations to advance the state of Nevada in nationwide rankings in key quality of life areas, including education, health and human services, public safety, economic diversification, job creation, transit, and energy use, and to develop a quality of life vision for the state of Nevada for a 5, 10, and 20-year period.
Good afternoon, Sean Carey. I am the Sparks City Manager. To assist the interim committee that will be studying this aspect, they are calling for Nevada's business and industry leaders to come together in what is known as Nevada's Vision Stakeholder Group. This group will be selected from across the state. Its membership will come from communities representing business, education, healthcare, human services, transit, and all other groups. They have adopted a very comprehensive set of services which are included in their definition of quality of life. And it is thought that this group of stakeholders in the business community and representatives throughout the state can assist them in completing this task. Applications for this committee are due by 5 p.m. today, and so we'll learn soon who are selected by the committee for this important work. It should be noted that the legislature also included an independent consultant who will prepare those independent statistical analysis that will allow us to rank the quality of services provided by the state of Nevada. They will also look very carefully at the allocation of revenues between state and local governments and examine, very importantly, the adequacy and stability of the resources that we're using to provide those services, examine that interplay between revenue sources and current economic activity within our state. Also, some of our funds in Nevada are called earmarked in that they're reserved for specific purposes. This committee will also examine what are the impacts of revenue sources being earmarked for very specific services. The consultant will assist the committee in investigating revenue and increases in population. Nevada has led our nation for so many years in growth and population. That has also increased the demand on local governments for services, as well as state agencies. Recommendations will be made in the area of equity. The word equity, of course, applies between all residents of the state, all levels of state government. They will, as an independent consultant, be charged with collecting the data that will assess Nevada's true current rankings in quality of life. These findings will be presented in their final form by July 1st of next year, 2010.
To assist both the subcommittee of the Interim Finance Committee and also the recommendations coming out of this study, there is a technical working group that was formed as well. This technical working group is made up of the Senate Fiscal Analyst, the Assembly Fiscal Analyst, the Chief of the Budget Division of the Department of Administration, the Executive Director of the Department of Taxation, the Vice Chancellor of Finance of the NSHE, or Nevada System of Higher Education, the Deputy Superintendent of the Administrative and Fiscal Services of the Department of Education, and the Chairman of the Committee on Local Government Finance. This working group is formed to essentially ensure that by the time that the recommendations are made on or before July 1, 2011, that the recommendations are able to be written up and accepted and forwarded to the subcommittee. They will undertake any work necessary to ensure that the state's readiness to implement required modifications to the state's existing revenue system are ready, including any upgrade or replacement of equipment and essentially implementation of new or changes to the tax structure. Committee is as follows. The independent consultants RFP responses were due October 1st. The subcommittee of the Interim Finance Committee is actually scheduled to meet tomorrow to select one of those consultants for the work. The Visioning Stakeholder Group, as my colleague mentioned earlier, deadline for that application has been extended to today at 5 o'clock. Incidentally, next week, the other subcommittee of the subcommittee is scheduled to pick the members of that committee. And the contract period is to run from December 1st, 2009 this year to October 1st of next year. The report due to the IFC is due July 1, 2010, and of course the legislation and report back to the legislature is due October 1st, 2010. Thank you.
Thank you, Saber and Sean. So we'll just jump into the open format again. What's happening currently in your jurisdiction for options, ideas about moving forward?
Deborah March, City of Henderson. I think this is an important piece of legislation, and the activity of this group is going to be essential to steering a course for our future in Nevada. And a couple of years ago, the Brookings Institution did some work here in Nevada and looked at the Mountain Mega study and basically looked at Nevada as it compared to the other mountain mega states, including Utah, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico. And one of the striking pieces of feedback that they provided was that Nevada was behind a lot of these other states because they hadn't engaged in a visioning exercise to really look at what their priorities are and then to begin focusing on reaching those goals. And I think that this is important for us as a state. To achieve those goals, we need to be on target, and to be a sustainable state and to have a sustainable future, we need to look at not only the economic implications, but the social and the environmental as well.
Good point. Comments? What type of recommendations are coming forth from the local governments to join these committees? Hopefully they're plentiful. Yeah, the deadline's today, or extended, Commissioner?
Thanks, I know you're trying to fill time. Christy, whoever was lobbying last time, if you look at the two resolves, can you just tell me, was the issue part of it of the ability, if there was a change in and whatever taxes were collected, that's why the computer software issue is contained within here?
That's my understanding, yes. Anytime that they have a change in what's collected or a new tax, they need to go through the computer system that's set up.
So they didn't want that to be a failure or an impediment if they came back with real-world recommendations, because it does specifically say the recommendation does come in with that, then they have to actually have contingency fund money for funding it, so that then would remove it from the table?
From what I understand, they didn't want to go back and repeat what has often happened in the past, whereby they start the session or fairly close to the start of the session with discussion about a tax structure or new taxes, and then by the time they come to an agreement, it takes staff that much longer to draft the legislation correctly, get any bugs out of the legislation, and then even longer to implement the program.
And then on the national rankings or the quality of life area, do we have any idea who those independent groups would be or who might be gathering or providing any of that?
Marvin or Mike, do you have any thoughts on that?
This is Mike Allistoy. I would expect the Vision Stakeholder Group to be involved in not necessarily the selection of the measures, but at least the confirmation of some of the other measures that have been previously discussed in the legislative environment. We all know what they are. There could be more. There are indices in terms of availability of health insurance, per capita income, educational attainment, all kinds of measures of household composition, et cetera, et cetera. So there are socioeconomic indicators
and indicators of status in that regard that are commonly discussed, and I would anticipate the vision stakeholders will have that as a substantial part of their agenda.
And if I might follow up, is there any prohibition from, if we have recommendations or through NACO and League of Cities, of independent groups for providing? I'm thinking of kids counts as an example, is an excellent resource that's done each year. It's fairly independent. Just making sure certain things don't get ignored. So I don't see any language that says we couldn't make any recommendations. I'm just not sure how this process.
Or those existing reports that are done nationally or locally that they be forwarded to the vision group. What are some thoughts about how to get local government's voices heard on this issue? I mean, obviously, the legislature set up various formats for participation in various groups, but collectively or regionally, is there thoughts about ideas you can give to your managers and staff about how collectively we move forward? Mayor?
I think we have to do it anecdotally myself, in the sense that we pay for our services as a result, at least in Las Vegas, of our share of the consolidated tax. And for the past 2 years, maybe a little less than that, every month the consolidated tax share to the city of Las Vegas has been going down. And you get to a point, of course, all of us do. I don't care whether it's a small city or a big city. We all get to the point where our income does not meet our expenses. And we provide the services that form the quality of life for all intents and purposes. We're the ones who pay for the streets and the traffic lights and the potholes and the parks and all the things that contribute to whether or not there's a quality of life that's going to be enjoyed in our communities. And I think that there has to be a serious discussion as to what effect this is having on each of us as far as cuts, retiring people from their employment, services that will be cut out. All of these things have to be part of the discussion, and I think that we have a relationship with the legislature where they will listen to us because, as was mentioned before, they represent the same people that we represent. And they have to be responsible to the same people that we have to be responsible to. So I think that this has to be a very personal conversation, and I think that the practical effect of what's taking place has to be felt by everybody in this room.
So personalizing it to your individual jurisdictions, make it real, make it very personal to legislators in the community. Over here, and then we'll go right there.
Nancy Boland, Esmeralda County. Again, going back to some discussions we've had at NACO, as has been pointed out, as our revenue shrinks, our abilities to perform services or the quality of life issues also shrink along with it. And one thing that we have discussed, and I know has happened in my own government, is that when we're no longer able to provide these services, or we have to make these horrible cuts, like to our senior programs, parks has been mentioned, that it needs to be brought up that we have no ability to raise the money, and the effect that has happened to our county government was brought down on us from the legislature. So a lot of times the ordinary person in the public does not understand how government works, and they need to be aware too, so that they can go back and talk to their representatives and make their feelings known in this also.
Making sure the public knows, also tying back into the home rule issue that we discussed earlier.
Since the mayor mentioned anecdotal, I'll mention Warren Russell, Elko County Commission. I'll mention two things that affect us, and we're talking about revenue structure, so we're kind of skirting around real issues, and one of the real issues is how are we going to be impacted on things like property tax. And I understand that the North and the South was already impacted by the state legislature on property tax in the last session. One of the reasons, besides the good price of gold, that Elko County was not impacted by the property tax is because we as a rural county were not included in that. However, and we're in pretty good shape financially, but if we were addressed in the same way by the state legislature regarding property tax, we would be significantly impacted. So a change in property tax, if it starts going to the state, it's going to impact us. A change in the way taxes on gold are going to start to impact us. And
the one size doesn't fit all.
We need to discuss the issues as well as talking about the process somewhere along the road.
Mary brought up the issue of the consolidated tax. What happens many times in the legislature when there's less money to go around, cities and counties go after each other sometimes on the issue of limited pot of money. Obviously, that is an issue that local governments here need to address. Where at all possible to go as a united front is a positive thing, but many times that can't be done. So those type of discussions, particularly on consolidated tax, which I was hear was always an ongoing issue every year about the fairness and whether that was distributed correctly.
Please.
Councilman.
Gary Reese, City of Las Vegas. It's really good to have this study on the tax structure. But I see these subcommittees coming back with different recommendations that will either benefit or hurt different parts of the state or some of the smaller cities or some of the smaller counties, as well as some of the larger cities and counties. How do we go about coming up with recommendations to get something that would be beneficial for everybody passed through the legislature? To me, you go up there and you have one side fighting the other side coming up with their own ideas, and they take, when they get these reports, to me, they take their side and pit it against the other side, and it's really, really tough, I think, to get anything passed that's going to be beneficial. I don't know how we can overcome that.
Other thoughts or comments about how to move forward collectively on this issue with the legislature? Commissioner?
Kristen Giuliani. I think part of whatever conversation, whether it's under home rule or even the financial, has to look at, we have to start identifying what are really local government services versus state services. What could be shared services amongst our areas? What could be regionalized further? What can be consolidated further? And as we have that conversation, some of those can then help direct or take away what financial pinnings have to be there. The fact is we have an unstable tax base, period, and it's regressive. And I think we're seeing the regression of that part of the tax. And then that allows a legislature that has 4 months to try to put a package together to figure out where they can get the votes. And unfortunately, one group over another gets hurt. And if we can use this committee and an independent consultant to really take a look at the structure, because it's fibrous. Everything is interconnected. SSCRT, then you go into the property tax and everything else, it's all interconnected. So to me, it still comes down to who's delivering what service and why, and then we find the financing, hopefully, to streamline it. And if there are increases that need to come in or cost shifting, then it's easier to do if we've actually really figured out what we're supposed to be doing. I mean, very truthfully, in the county, we act like the city sometimes, and the city sometimes acts like the county, and we have to get past that.
So suggestions, what's the best delivery of services from county, city to the state issue? Other comments? Before we move on? Yes.
Steve Wolfson, City of Las Vegas. What I'd like to really see in this process, especially for this resolution, is direct public input, whether it be in the form of town halls or other types of open forums where our real constituents, the real people out there that are going to be affected one way or another, are allowed to be heard. Because we're talking about an examination of revenue sources and distribution, et cetera. And when I talk to people, some people are willing to pay more if they really feel confident that there's going to be a direct correlation to some benefit. If we go to our constituents and we say we need you to pay more in taxes, whether it be a sales tax or some other sort of tax, what I hear is that they might be willing to pay more if they really feel comfortable that there's going to be a direct and immediate and local benefit. So I'd like to make sure that that's part of a discussion with our constituents in the form of town halls or whatever format we take.
So the recommendation go back to personalizing it to each of your jurisdictions and using various different avenues to kind of get that input from folks.
Tom?
Yes.
Steve Kirk, City of Henderson. I think as part of that, in conjunction with what Commissioner Wilson said, I think it's important that we do an inventory and identify things that we do well.
each of us as a city, as a county, and identify what other cities and what other counties do well that we don't do so well at. For example, in Henderson, we think we do parks really well. In fact, we won the gold medal a few years ago for having the best Parks and Recreation Department in the country for a city of our size. So we think we do that well. We may not do other things, deliver public services in other areas quite as well as some of the other municipalities. So I think League of Cities, NACO would be places for us to discuss these things and really do an honest inventory and not be, so territorial. Just admit, hey, we don't do that quite as well as you do. Can you help us? And I think if we do that, then we'll do a better job at really delivering adequate and superior service to our constituents versus just saying, hey, it's our city, we're not going to give up any control to anybody else.
And that also would bleed over to our next conversation, too, perhaps about regionalization or reorganization of services. Good point.
Bob Cashel,
Mayor?
Mayor of Reno. You know, it's very evident that the state cannot continue to operate on a sales tax type government. All of the things we're talking about here, we have to do. But anybody in this room that doesn't think the state is not coming to look at part of the property tax is kidding themselves. So we need to sit down and decide, like you're saying, what the counties and cities do, but also what the state's going to give us back or take away if they take part of our property tax, because that's the only stable tax we have. Sales tax will float up like this, be great one year and down the next year. But we need to all work together and come up and see what the counties do, what the cities do, and also, if they're coming after our property tax, then what can we get back? Can the state take over some of the things they've given us in the past? So we really all need to work together.
Point.
Tom?
Yes.
Sherry,
Mayor.
City of North Las Vegas. Let me just commend Clark County. I've watched lately, they have a committee that is studying the tax structure in the state, and they have, on their August 28th meeting, they had a great report done by Hobbs and on sort of the history and how we got to the point where we are now in the state because of the tax structure. And so what I'm saying is we have some very brilliant minds in this state that can work to help find a solution. I think it's going to take far more than what we've done before. But again, I commend Clark County, and we're going to get a copy of that.
It's a good idea to share that information with all the jurisdictions.
It's excellent background, and it's excellent recommendations for solutions on how to restructure the tax distribution in the state, the way it's collected, and what we're doing, and how to solve the problems. And it's a good place to start.
Comment over here. Yep.
Well, some of it's already been said. This is Mayor Tobler from Boulder City, but I think one of the things we need to do is paint the real picture for our representatives, state representatives, on where our budgets are. And I think that's kind of been pointed out, but really be able to show that we have nowhere else to cut. And when it comes down to it, we're all in the same boat. And it's great to look at the revenue side and figure out some of these things. And some of us are doing some unique things about revenue, and that's where we need to do more talking. But also on the budget, on the expense side. And I think we all have to become aware and start talking about the labor side of things. Because really, when we talk about cuts now, that's where it's going to be. And we've cut everything else. We can't continue to cut services because we're talking about our standard of living, our lifestyles, and at some point in time, we're going to have to take a serious look at the labor side of things.
So the two issues. One is the communication issue, and I know I'm a facilitator, and I won't put in my 2 cents worth, but I was amazed of how few times state officials actually sat down with their local elected officials and actually had conversations. And so perhaps that is something you would want to consider about how do you personalize it, how do you talk about your same constituents together and develop that really personal communication issue. And then the mayor brought up the other flip side of the issue is that we are a service government, and that's where most of the costs are, and that labor perhaps is one issue that probably needs to be looked at and discussed because there isn't much left once you start cutting. Any further comments? We'll go up here, the mayor, and then we'll wrap it up.
Mayor Bob Cashel. Mayor Goodman asked me to be nice today, but I don't know how. You know, one thing that we also need to look at is we're going through this study, and we passed, or the legislature passed, a property tax cap. All of your properties now have been reduced in property tax. In the next 30 years, at 3% and 6%, you'll never get those property taxes back up to where they are today. So that's an issue that we need to look at, and we need to study it. And I'll be nice the rest of the day, Oscar.
Thank you. We'll move on. Thank you for the presentation. We'll move on to the last piece of legislation, which is AB 494, concerning the consolidation or reorganization of certain functions performed by local governments. And that although this pertains to Washoe and Clark County and the respective cities within those, the dialogue is an important one throughout Nevada. So although the legislation specifically talks Washoe and Clark County, it obviously is very important throughout the issue of Nevada. And to that end, Washoe County and the City of Las Vegas will be giving this report.
Good afternoon, mayors and members of the city councils and county commissions. I'm Betsy Fretwell. I'm the city manager of the City of Las Vegas, and joining me is the county manager, Katie Simon from Washoe County. We have a brief presentation for you today to go over a piece of legislation, as Tom indicated, that primarily impacts the southern part of the state, Clark County and Washoe County only. There is a bill that was passed last session, that's AB 494, regarding consolidation, and it requires that the cities and the counties in Clark and Washoe provide a report on consolidation. There are three key areas that in the preamble of the legislation are carved out, specially mentioned, that have to be addressed in these reports, which are due by September 1st. Those issues are public safety, public works, and general government. And basically, there's 6 key things that must be addressed in these reports. The first of those is to identify the aspects of those functions that are currently consolidated. I think most of us have a pretty good sense of that. We will talk about a few of those towards the end of the presentation. We are also to identify the aspects of those functions that have or are being considered for consolidation. There are probably some discussions that are going on in both counties regarding various things that might be consolidated or be a part of a service-sharing agreement. The third component is to identify the aspects of those functions that aren't consolidated, or whether those aspects may be appropriate for consolidation, meaning they may be likely candidates for consolidation but haven't been discussed yet, and may be subject to reorganization in the future. And then we're supposed to analyze and make recommendations regarding consolidation or reorganization of one or more of those aspect functions. So if we haven't talked about them, we'll have to now. The final 2 points on this slide are providing estimates of the costs of consolidation or reorganization of those various aspects that have not been consolidated, and the projection of any long-term cost savings, as much as we can, what's feasible to estimate. And then we're to analyze the benefits of the creation of a permanent committee of the affected entities that would meet periodically to discuss and coordinate future efforts of consolidation or reorganization of those functions. And that pretty much summarizes the bill and the obligations of the cities and the counties in Washoe and Clark, what our obligations are by next September.
Good afternoon. For the record, Katie Simon, Washoe County Manager. Of course, consolidation and shared services is not new to local government. We have existing statutes that govern our ability to enter into cooperative agreements. That's through NRS 277. We can make interlocal contracts. We can have cooperative agreements. We can establish regional development districts by law as specified. And there are implied agreements, which we'll talk about some representative samples of. Of course, NRS 280, the Metro Police Department, is in statute. Further, Southern Nevada Regional Housing Authority from the 2009 legislative session, AB 478,
In northern Nevada, we have Truckee Meadows Regional Planning legislation, which is in NRS 278. And of course, many of us take advantage of local government purchasing, joinder or mutual use of contracts under NRS 332.
I think it's important for us to point out some of the things that we've been working on in southern Nevada, and as we were talking city and county managers about this list, it was extensive. So this is a sample. These two slides are just a sample of the many things we've been working on, and I believe Katie has about 4 slides, and many of the things that they're doing are very similar to things that we've been doing in Clark County. We use NRS 277 extensively here. And in fact, oftentimes when we use it, it ends up getting codified in NRS. The Southern Nevada Regional Planning Coalition is one example of that. The Water Authority, the Health Board, a variety of others, started out as intergovernmental collaborations and ended up becoming governmental entities through state statute. So Katie mentioned a couple of them. I would like to point out that recently in Southern Nevada we did work through consolidating the Housing Authority. I'd like to suggest that that was a partnership with the legislature. They created the legislation that allowed us to do that, basically at the local government's request. We knew there was a problem there and we needed to work it out. So I think that's a really good example of how we can work together to solve difficult issues at the local level with state authorizing legislation. I'll turn it over to Katie to go over the other northern Nevada examples.
As Betsy said, we have long had a history, and throughout the state we've had a history of cooperation. Some of the examples of consolidation efforts among Reno, Sparks, Washoe County, the Washoe County School District, and other entities have been voter approved, as our Regional Animal Services Shelter, our Regional Emergency Communications Dispatch, and our 800 megahertz regional radio system. The regional radio system was supported by a vote of the people. That now has 17 partners, which includes the state of Nevada, tribal governments, NV Energy. We have a considerable number of folks who participate in that. Of course, things like regional road impact fees, which you all have elsewhere in the state, housing, and of course something that is unique in our area, a regional snow response plan, which you wouldn't have here in southern Nevada, but our local governments cooperate on that. We have partnership libraries between the school district and the county library system, in which our school libraries function as public libraries in many of our communities. We've consolidated our fire departments between the county and the city of Reno. Public health, as you have here, we have a regional public safety training center, many law enforcement efforts that are consolidated detention facility, water reclamation, water authority, flood control, and regional planning. And one point that I want to make, yes, we have a long history of consolidation and shared services, but every one of these is very hard won. It's a very difficult effort to come together to reach those agreements. And we don't find that there are huge savings, but what we do find is that service is measurably improved for our shared citizens and our shared constituents for the same cost, and we can avoid growth of costs in the future.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead. We are currently underway working on shared service evaluation, and this actually happened before AB 494. Elected officials from the City of Reno, the City of Sparks, and Washoe County, as well as our Washoe County School District, came together to establish a working group to guide our efforts in looking at opportunities for integration of services. This week, the local governments approved a release of a request for proposals for professional services to evaluate and guide that integration. They are starting with human resources, information technology, and purchasing functions.
As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the reports are due by September 1st of 2010. And Katie mentioned kind of where northern Nevada is going. There's obviously options for submittal. It could be an individual submittal. It could be a regional submittal. It could be multiple agencies within the region that's impacted. And I suppose there could even be a discussion about having a statewide report on consolidation, although really only 2 counties are impacted by this legislation. I think it's worthy of noting, too, that the state does have some experience of combining cities and counties. Carson City is a consolidated city-county, but for purposes of the discussion today, it's primarily the Clark and Washoe impacts of this legislation.
And just one last point, we recognize that these are very serious issues to local elected officials, that it is very important that you maintain your sovereignty and that you maintain control over your responsiveness to your constituents. And really, the most successful collaborations have been those that have been mutually respectful and recognize one another's sovereignty and mutual need for responsibility.
We'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you. So the shared governance is something that's not new for northern or southern or probably many areas in the state. This is definitely an area that you could divide and conquer, given that it becomes very emotional sometimes. But there's some very specific legislation that gives some very specific timetables, and the options of moving forth can be individual, regionally, statewide. What are the thoughts, perhaps, of what you've been looking at now, again, with a large history? Washoe County has already taken a jump, specifically looking at shared services in that area.
A couple questions, Jessica Sbraza from the City of Reno, for Betsy and Katie. Part of the issue we run into with consolidation being cost prohibitive are things like cherry picking and some of the other legislative mandates that deal with consolidation. Does part of the study focus on working with our legislature to see if some of the regulations can be changed so that consolidation does make sense in the future? Because that seems to be one of the biggest obstacles we have when we're looking at efficiencies or consolidating different departments.
Betsy, or I don't know if that's something Mike or Marvin want to jump in, or Betsy, or...
We can take a stab at it. The legislation doesn't specifically say identify any legislative obstacles to the consolidation, but that would probably be a natural part of the feasibility analysis that's required. So I would assume, since these reports will be presented to the legislature, that any of those constraints would be a part of that report, part of the feasibility section, so that the legislature could determine if it was something they wanted to address if a consolidation were pursued, for instance.
And then just following up on Councilman Kirk, in what he was stating as far as we all have our services that we provide that we're very good at, does the study also include services that we could potentially share with the state, where we can look at, we've all talked about, fiscal, but a lot of them are here, and I think we should compliment the legislators that are here. I see the majority leader here. I think Assemblywoman Smith is all the way here from northern Nevada, and I just personally want to compliment our legislators, and I don't know everyone who's here because I can't see back there, but I think this is an area that we can look at through NACO 2 and Nevada League. It is potentially those shared services and the things we can look at and partner with the state.
So you're going to share not only among cities and counties, or cities and cities, but also cities, counties, and state. Yeah.
On behalf of Mesquite, I've really enjoyed the home rule discussion. As you know, Mesquite is probably one of the 6 that is a general law city, and so therefore the empowerment under 266 is different. But I would like to speak on the consolidation. We enjoy and would welcome consolidating on many different levels. But logistically, just given the size of Clark County, I think we're concerned with, for instance, joining with Metro. We have our own police department. The level of service that we've created within Mesquite, just the distance alone, we're hoping people are mindful of that. Animal services might be another. So there might be areas where some of us on the fringe of Clark County, to consolidate everything might be problematic.
So paying a close attention to service delivery, too, that when you talk about consolidation. Over here, and then right there.
Is this working?
It's working now, yes.
Consolidation and sharing of services has been discussed by the legislature a lot over the years in various forms. And I think perhaps one of the things that's different about this effort is it brings the conversation back down to the local level where perhaps it belongs. One of the things I think we need to keep in mind when we're talking about consolidation is that you can talk about consolidation of services without talking about consolidation of governance. The lady from Mesquite made a very good point about the distances involved, and when you consolidate governance, you can create a situation where people in the outlying areas have less opportunity to participate. I think it's also important to remember when you're talking about consolidation of whether services or governance, that all the agencies that might conceivably be involved in the consolidation efforts or the combination of services need to be at the table so that this isn't imposed on one agency from another agency. So it should be an interesting set of discussions.
Thank you. Right here.
Robin Williamson from Carson City, and thanks for the shout-out. We are the only consolidated city-county government in the state of Nevada, and that's basically more from geography than any kind of method in our madness. But I think that we certainly aren't we certainly aren't involved in this legislative report, but I think it would behoove the counties to identify the regionalness that has been going on and work between counties sharing services that we know is going on. Between Douglas, Carson City, Lyon, Story, we do a lot of especially in law enforcement, and we have different youth detention facilities where we have gotten permission to share facilities and money. And perhaps it might be to our benefit to identify where counties are working together to provide better services to our residents and educate our legislators that those efforts are going on.
And we're looking at examples. We don't have to look too far. You can look at Carson as one example. Comments? Commissioner.
Christine Taliani. I would hope that public safety also, in my mind, includes the courts, and that there's potentials there of making sure we're delivering services well, justice well, but we should be reviewing that as well, and that ought to be part of it.
And that clearly is a state, local, and county.
And personally, I believe the courts are a state responsibility, but that's been a long-term debate. I would also urge that as we look at this, we make sure we involve our employee representatives, because you don't want things to be happening to people. You want them to be part of the solution, so that's got to be a component.
So again, the theme of bringing people to the table, not only cities, but also employees.
Also employee groups. And then I think the mayor from Mesquite, there are certain things that are probably still best handled service delivery, but there are also components of that. I noticed up on one of the slides, SWAT, I think was mentioned, labs. We don't need 5 different ones. There are ways to do efficiencies that deliver a service still, but you still then empower the local jurisdictions who still have their own police force and so on and so forth, as an example. So I hope that we don't just say, oh, no, that's someone's turf, but look within that turf to see if there are places where there can be a better, either cost savings. And most studies have shown you don't always save a lot of money. You really get it more in your staffing down the road, your efficiency of how you deliver the service. So we got to recognize that part of it.
Tom?
Yes, Councilman.
Steve Wolfson, City of Las Vegas. Chris G. must have been reading my mind when you brought up public safety, because I was going to discuss whether you call it consolidation or reorganization of our court system, in particular our justice court and our municipal court.
Absolutely.
I know Betsy's probably cringing right now, because these are big revenue raisers for our entities.
I have the original study that was done on that.
Okay. But, whether you get a traffic ticket south of Sahara or north of Sahara, the confusion that our constituents have in, am I going to justice court or municipal court, it's crazy. So I'd really like to see this committee study whether you call it consolidation or reorganization of the lower court systems vis-a-vis, let's just start with traffic tickets, whether they be parking violations or moving violations, because just when you talk about servicing our constituents, that's a real, in my opinion, real need to review.
So the public safety, including that broader definition of public safety, include courts.
Thank you. Kitty Jones, Washoe County Commissioner. And to go back to what Commissioner June Kiliani mentioned, it is true when we are looking at shared services and our staff hear about it, generally there is widespread panic amongst staff. And that also creates a problem going down the road because we have to rely on said staff to give us good information about how we could move forward to be more efficient. And relatedly, tomorrow morning, at noon actually, for a brown bag lunch, myself and Commissioner Brudernitz, who serve on the Shared Services Committee, are going to have a town hall-like meeting with our employees so that they do feel like they are part of the process and this isn't happening to them in the process. And we don't really foresee any further staff layoffs, considering how many hits we have taken at this point. But more importantly, that their jobs probably will change in the future, as all of ours will, as we progress and evolve. But the other side is that we will be avoiding future costs so that they can have far more job security working in a noble profession as public service.
Point. Yes. There, and then...
I don't want to offend the two counties who are primarily involved, but I think in the rural counties, we also look at Washoe and Clark and see what they're doing. For example, I did an interview with one of the police officers representing Clark County and talked to him about the Metro Police because in Oakwood County, that issue had been brought up with us. And one of the points that was brought up and I can't recall because it was a couple of years ago, but they said it was something like 9 to 10 years from starting to work on the process that they actually accomplished having a working, viable kind of police department. Now, in this context, it appears that the conversation is drifting to things that are going to be long-term or medium-term, and I'm wondering about consolidation in terms of expectation, even before the next session of the legislature. Is there some consolidation going to occur or being directed? Is the next session going to direct us in the rural counties or in your counties? That's the questions that come to my mind.
Yeah, Katie, Betsy, and then maybe Marvin. Mike, it looked like it was both short-term and long-term. The fact that they included a permanent committee, an ongoing committee, kind of lends to the idea that perhaps a lot of these discussions are long-term in nature. I think Katie made the comment that none of these were easy, these shared services. They took a long period of time, and it would appear that the legislature recognized that it's more of an ongoing issue. But there may be some short-term areas that could be accomplished, and you all might want to comment on that.
Thank you, Tom. And I just wanted to mention Katie Simon, Washoe County Manager. There are short-term opportunities, and in fact, there's really a continuum from just things like sharing joinder bids for purchasing all the way to full consolidation. There's a lot of steps along that continuum, and so there are opportunities to look at things throughout, even in your own organizations, departments that can be consolidated and reorganized. We are aware that there is some discussion that perhaps there are folks who think that consolidation is a magic bullet that will produce large amounts of savings that could, in fact, then be returned to the state. And we have seen it doesn't necessarily save lots of money when we've all cut so much from our budgets, but again, it's an efficiency for the future. So it's absolutely worth doing, even if it's short-term or if it's long-term. We know that if we are going to integrate our technology systems, it's going to take a long time, and it's going to take a lot of money. But that's where we can get some great bang for our buck. As we replace technology systems, we'll look at can we do the same technology system so we can be more efficient for all of our shared constituents.
I think, Katie, your point is well taken that it necessarily would not be a savings in service, but it could make a world of difference to the citizen that has to deal with the myriad of services out there. Councilman?
Thanks, Tom. Stavros Anthony, the City of Las Vegas. I understand the intent of the legislature, and I mean, consolidation is good, regionalization is good. There's items on the PowerPoint that show it is a success, but the two concerns I have are if you're going to do consolidation, I mean, you have to really do an in-depth study to really find out if it works. And I mean, it says on bullet number 3, it says identify the aspects of those functions that are not consolidated and whether those aspects may be appropriate for consolidation or reorganization, and it's less than a year to do that. I mean, you could spend 1 year just doing a department with the county and city. So, you know, Katie and Betsy, I'm not sure if we can do all that. And number two is, I still don't know how and who and what, and I mean, how are we going to do all this? You mentioned the county's going to do their own, or cities are going to do their own, or we're going to get together. We haven't even gotten that ironed out, and it's less than a year. So can you kind of comment on that?
Nice, Katie punted to me. Betsy Fretwell, city manager of the city of Las Vegas. These are complicated, complex studies. There have been a few in the Clark County, Las Vegas history that have taken months and months to do the entire organizations. And as a region, we're going to need to have a discussion pretty quickly to figure out how we're going to address this legislative report pretty quickly. There have been some preliminary discussions at the Regional Planning Coalition level about the potential of that group taking up this topic on behalf of the region. That hasn't been determined yet, and it's probably something that is ripe for discussion among the Southern Nevada governments. So, you know, I think there is quite a bit of work to be done, and as Katie indicated, it's not necessarily cheap either. A lot of times there's quite a bit of cost to do this analysis and do it very well so that you know what you're getting into before you get there. Obviously, the legislation creates 3 key areas that could be focused in on, so that may be a way to take it one piece at a time and hit on the areas that the region feels are most significant to address prior to the legislature convening next year. We turn in what we can get ready by September and simply describe what we were unable to get done.
And I would share, Katie Simon, Washoe County, that again, I applaud our elected officials in northern Nevada and Washoe County area. 2 each from Reno, Sparks, Washoe County, and the school district serve on our joint elected officials shared services committee and created that themselves to give us guidance. I would also caution that even though the existing legislation does not include anyone besides Clark and Washoe, I can foresee that it may be broadened for other entities to look at shared services in the future. So certainly not this session, but in future.
Commissioner.
Thank you. I'm a firm believer in stealing ideas, so I just might suggest that maybe the respective city and county look at establishing a shared services committee of elected, similar to what Washoe and Sparks have done. Find out from sorry, I know that better than, but and then find out how you put it together. I mean, let's not always reinvent a wheel, and that might give us a place to take a look.
And that's going to be a jump on a permanent committee that the legislation calls for anyway.
Right.
Good point. Other thoughts or options or ideas about how to go forth to present this study to the legislature?
Tom?
Yes.
I have a question.
Commissioner.
Does the legislature allow us to make suggestions to services that we want to consolidate, like the court system? Or is it specifically for public safety, public works, and general government? Or does the court system fall under public safety?
I'll turn that over to Mike, Marvin, Katie, or Betsy, but I would imagine that you have to minimally cover those areas. You could add other areas, but public safety can be very broadly defined to include the court system. In fact, many areas consider that part of public safety. So.
Well, as an example, Councilman Brown parked illegally. He just sent me a message, asked if he was going to get ticketed, and I said absolutely. If we were consolidated, he'd know the answer before he asked me.
Mike or Marvin, did anyone else want to jump in on that? Is there any inability to expand or to add additional areas?
I think this is Mike.
No, Councilman Brown, you're okay.
I think you have 2 realms here. One potentially is consolidation of services now provided by a local government with some degree of latitude, or one local government for another level of local government. Another would be, depending on how far, for example, you get into the judiciary, you actually have a state-prescribed structure for the judiciary. The way the justice townships are established, the exact structure and counties covered by the district judiciary, and of course the governance of the Supreme Court. So in those areas where there's significant state overlap, you would have a complete other realm of the proposal and to seek legislative approval.
Councilwoman?
I just wanted to add support to the comment made by the two ladies about the having the shared services committee, because we're talking, excuse me, I didn't give my name. I'm Lois Tarkanian from the City Council of Las Vegas. We're talking here about big things. We're talking here about things that take months and years, and we're even getting a little tired talking about it because we know how much it's going to involve. We also know we're all going to go back to our offices and our work, and we're going to be inundated with a lot of other things. And getting to those big things takes time steps. And I think that shared responsibilities committee, if we can steal it a little bit from up north, I really think that would help us down south. And it would show the legislature, at least we're starting, at least we're trying. And if we all throw out our egos and don't get involved in who has more authority here or there, and truly look at what's best for the citizens, I think we can accomplish something. And I think this helps us meet the larger vision need to get a step ahead on it. And thank you.
Another suggestion for that. Any final comments on the reorganization? Thank you. So I'll spend less than a minute wrapping up, and it's about 10 till 5. You still have public comment to take, so the goal of getting everybody out of here at 5 o'clock is accomplished. But there's some themes that surfaced under each of the three discussions, and one of those was the issue of communications, is that this is so vitally important to local government. State legislators and local government share the same constituents, so finding ways for communication. The other one and the other recommendation that came out is how do you personalize it to your own area with your own citizens and with your own legislators to talk about what the impact and what we're struggling with as a state. The other theme that came up there was a need for further analysis by your own staff, by your technical staff, and looking at opportunities for other reports, whether it's Brookings, whether it's Kids Count, that are out there that has a lot of these analysis that can end or add to this whole discussion. So with that, I want to thank everybody, too, for a very good discussion and a very important discussion. And the fact that you're here, you took the time, really underscores to your citizens and to everybody in Nevada how very, very important this is. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Since this is a public meeting, now would be the time for public comment. If there's anybody from the audience that would like to address this body during this portion of the agenda, now is the time to do that. No public comment? Well, before we adjourn, I'd like to take just a second and thank everyone once again for coming to this, what I'm calling a very historic occasion. I think this forum has gone a long way in showing the unity that we have as local elected officials. Also, I would like to invite you to join me and the rest of the City Council in the amphitheater, which is just to my right here, on the other side of this building, for a reception. Please wear your name tag, because that will be the ticket to get you into that reception. It is being sponsored by Public Services and by Barrett Gold. Oh, I'm sorry. We must have somebody for public comment.
Hello, yes. I will surely be fired before I get home if I don't make a public comment. Juanita Clark from Charleston Neighborhood Preservation from the City of Las Vegas. And we have been concerned about this issue for years. When Aaron Kenney first came into the county and was down at the State Legislative Building on East Washington, pushing for home rule for the county of Clark. We were down there very concerned about the ability of the number of people. I have no idea how many representatives of the people are here today, but there's quite a number. And listening to the comments that I've listened to, as a constituent of many of you, and representing just a few constituents in the bucket, we are very concerned that you have asked for and a large animal, bigger than anything that you currently show adeptness at handling, and to be concerned. And I'm very impressed with the idea of doing something with the egos, but we know how that goes. And as constituents, we get whipped around too. I'm very concerned about this. I am representing a group that is against this. We see our city as having taken on some more powers, and instead of becoming more open and more available, we find that things are worded in a way that's a challenge for the regular person to the lay person from government to comprehend, and sometimes things are held at different times of the day and different locations that just make it very unhandy for the regular constituent to the lay constituent to be aware of what you're planning to do with our taxes. And we're often just not asked, but people sit and discuss what's in my pocket or what's in our pockets, and we're not getting any questions asked of us. And so I would ask for the comment of the layperson in relating to being an elected official, and particularly staff. Often staff is given, and they have to have much responsibility. And so, and ask our elected officials to be aware of what they're asking staff to do in relationship to the individual. Thank you.
Thank you. One more time, anybody else for public comments? All right. I've just been asked to announce, because of this meeting and most of the city officials that are here, for the Nevada League of Cities meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we will have the opening ceremonies right here in the convention center, right here at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. There's no other public comment. I guess procedurally, I will adjourn this meeting, and then the other city councils who have to adjourn their meeting can do so. So this meeting is adjourned. Mayor Goodman.
Thank you. On behalf of the City of Las Vegas, and I'm sure everybody who has participated in this very informative session, I want to thank Mayor Hafen and the City of Henderson for hosting this. I think it's been very important for us to see that we can all work together and express ourselves. And with that, on behalf of the City of Las Vegas, a special City Council meeting is adjourned.
Mayor Hafen, thank you very much for your hospitality. We're looking forward to visiting with you after a while. On behalf of the City of Reno, we are adjourned.
On behalf of the City of North Las Vegas, we are adjourned. On behalf of Clark County, we are adjourned. On behalf of the City of Mesquite, we are adjourned.
Thank you.